coming on the second episode on the Nassimi Talks show. We appreciate all our followers, all our subscribers, everybody that viewed our episode last time. We covered a lot of topics. We try to be as much as live and real talk as much as we can. And we have here our second episode. Today we have an icon as our guest. I would say a gentleman that managed to see decades of Manhattan. He contributed not only on the real estate part, but he contributed to the change, the evolution of Manhattan in a very, very high level way. I mean, anyone that is in real estate or non-real estate knows this figure, knows this man. So I don't need to make too much introduction. I wanted to introduce our guest today, Bob Knakal.
Hey, Rich. Great to be here with you today. Thanks for having me.
It's an honor and pleasure, and I don't have to say more than that. You've been a legendary figure here in real estate in Manhattan, and I mean, there's a lot of things we could say, but to be honest, is like your contribution to the city is far and beyond of many other people in the sense of maybe developers, or you brought in, you changed the landscape of Manhattan. But before jumping in, I would like to talk about, in memoriam of Sam Zell, which was a pioneer of real estate himself too, Titan, family of immigrants, and I think you know him pretty well. So I would like you to spend some words about him too.
Sure. Well, I didn't know him very, very well, but I did meet Sam several times. I'm a Wharton School grad at Penn, and Sam and a partner of his started the Zell Lurie Real Estate Center at Wharton many, many years ago. And always had real estate related conferences and things, and Sam would always, not always, but almost always make a guest appearance, and he'd come in his jeans and a button down.
Interesting character, by the way, right?
The man, he was one of a kind,
okay,
without a doubt. But one of the brilliant real estate minds in the country, and really did some fascinating things, some groundbreaking things, and to say that he was a real estate character would be an understatement, but quite a guy, and we
quite a figure actually in New York City. Yeah. I mean, anyone that heard his name and his transaction, he did one of the biggest portfolio sale ever. I think I'm not saying he introduced that, but he was a legend after that deal that made him jump more and more into this kind of deal. So we will miss him, and I think that, again, his contribution to the city was quite unique, like you said.
And I think one of the things that also stood out about Sam is that he did a lot of things that were counterintuitive. He had the nickname at one time, the Grave Dancer.
The Grave Dancer.
He made moves when other people were afraid to make moves. And then, he always subscribed to the fact when nobody wants to buy is when you should buy, and when everybody wants to buy is when you should sell. I think he did that with his big office portfolio.
Correct.
And he also...
Pretty legendary, that office portfolio deal, right?
Absolutely. And he got into markets and out of markets at seemingly the perfect time every time. So he was really quite an amazing real estate investor.
Well, the way you describe him, he was very, very smart. I mean, I never had the real pleasure of dealing with him, but from hearing the stories and reading about him, I think he was really a character that New York City will miss him.
Yeah, he was a character, and we do miss him.
Very good. So, Bob, listen, now let's jump to you. You are another very strong character for New York City. I think that the way you started in the real estate industry with your former partner, Paul Massey, right? So why don't you give me a little bit of, the audience know about you, but give me through your lens about Bob, how he started from your first deal. Just let's run with you, Bob.
Well, I'll go all the way back to when I was 8 years old playing baseball in the Maywood Boys Club in northern New Jersey, and I played ball. I collected baseball cards. I loved always looking at the back of baseball cards at the statistics. So
you were already a number guy.
I used to track my own
already on baseball.
Absolutely, I tracked my own statistics as a pitcher in Little League. Through college, I played. It
was in blood.
And I think that's what really, my affinity for statistics developed on the back of baseball cards, basically. And I kept that through getting into real estate. And I got into real estate completely by accident, pretty well-known
by
story.
accident? Yes.
Well known.
I mean, we read the story, but let me hear it from your.
No, I was a freshman at the Wharton School in 1981. Wanted to be an investment banker like every other Wharton kid. Drove around Northern Jersey with my resume over spring break, looking for a job that would look good on the resume at investment banks, commercial banks. Come out of a Payne Weber office
In 1981.
1981.
That's close to the crash.
Well, it was after the tumultuous time when the prime rate was 18%.
Correct.
And interest rates were off the chart.
Yeah.
The stock market didn't crash until 87.
87 was, but they started to like give you a little bit of headaches back then, right?
Well, I was in college. I was a college kid. I didn't know what the heck was going on. You know, interest rates are high. It didn't matter to me that much.
They seem a joke right now today compared.
That's right. But I came out of a Payne Weber office across the hall. I saw Coldwell Banker. I went in thinking the place was a bank. Dropped my resume off.
Coldwell Banker, the company.
Coldwell Banker, the company.
There is the company. Okay, the residential.
I saw a sign, Coldwell Banker. I thought it was a bank.
Good.
I dropped my resume off. They set up an interview for the following day. And before the interview, I went to the library, excuse me, to look up this bank. So it was a real estate company. Almost didn't go on the interview, but they were the only ones hiring college kids for the summer. Took the job, loved it, went back my next 2 summers. Show up at Madison Avenue, 437 Madison on July 16th of 1984 and meet my boss. He says, Massey just got out of a training program. He can show you around here. Follow him around.
That was when you met Paul.
That's right.
Okay.
And
1986.
This was 1984.
84.
We, you know, at the time, CB had about 60 brokers leasing office space, 20 in the retail leasing division. There were 4 guys in the building sales group. 3 had about 20 years of experience. Paul, who had just gotten out of a training program, and then I show up. It became very apparent that the guys with 20 years of experience weren't going to spend a lot of time with us. So day 2 on the job, Paul and I having lunch, and we say, hey, look, why don't we just work together, split everything 50-50, see how that goes. And that was the start of a 30-year partnership.
Wow. That's how we started.
That's how we started.
Interesting. And then the rest, it became like a kind of legendary story.
Yeah, then we started our business in 1988.
You founded Massey Knackle.
We founded Massey Knackle November 15th of 88.
What was your first office?
First office was an 18-month sublet on the 14th floor of 16 East 52nd Street.
Okay.
It was just Paul, myself, and a secretary. And, you know, we were going to implement basically a residential farming approach to investment sales, where we're going to take neighborhoods, work the neighborhood, go to every block, call every owner on every block, and then go to the next block, get to know the area better than anyone. And that.
So you went to like basically you vivisect Manhattan. You did block by block, right? You started, let's call it that zip code, and you started to tackle every single owner.
No, when we started, Paul worked 55th to 63rd between 5th and Lex. I worked 55th to 63rd, Lex to 1st. And we just called every owner on every block.
Where would you find the names? Like how we were canvassing? There was no Property Shark. There was no LoopNet.
The Blue Book, we called it, which was about 50% accurate back in those days. So a lot of it was calling. You couldn't get somebody's information. You call the tenants. Hey, I need to call I'm from the city. I'm from the fire department. I need to talk to the owner of the building. You're going to get a violation. Give me the owner's information. Whatever we had to do to get the information.
Like genius.
You got it, and you put together a database of all the sales going on in the neighborhood, who was buying, who was selling, what zoning changes may affect value, what new development
How would you pull this data, by the way?
Well, that was all publicly available at the time, but a lot of it was just constant cold calling and prospecting. That was like an
amount of phone calls every day, right?
Well, our goal was to talk to 40 owners every week. 8 a day for the 5 days that we were making calls, although we did work 7 days a week back in those days, which working 7 days a week in those days meant actually going into the office 7 days.
Correct. Not virtual right now.
When you left the office,
yes,
you were out of business.
Yes,
you had no cell phone, no fax machine, no computer.
None of these things. Nothing of now today's technology.
So it was Saturday morning, Sunday morning, driving from New Jersey.
Old school office hours in the morning early till late at night, punching the phone, sending fax, keep cold calling, putting data, all paperwork, right?
It was all paperwork.
Wow.
All paperwork. And
Wow.
but our whole philosophy was, if we could specialize in one neighborhood and get to be a neighborhood expert, that would enable us to differentiate ourselves from the thousands of other brokers that were trying to sell buildings.
Who were your main competitor back then? Like,
Back then, oh my gosh, it was Douglas Elliman actually had a big commercial division.
Really? Back in the end of the 80s as a big
In the mid 80s, sure.
It was Prudential back then, I think.
Eastern Consolidated, and all the big boys.
Eastern Consolidated, yeah.
CB and JLL and C&W and Newmark, and Williams Real Estate was around. A lot of companies were doing things, but interestingly, back then, and I think in the 1960s, 1970s, and going into the 80s, a lot of brokers did everything. They would sell buildings, lease office space, rent a store. They weren't as highly specialized.
There was like a mix,
today.
right? You had residential also involved, like condo sales, right? And also retail leasing, all mixed use.
I don't know if brokers did condo sales also, but the brokers were not as highly specialized as they are today.
Okay, it was
So
like a mix.
our whole idea is specialize. That enables you to differentiate yourself, and that differentiation created a competitive advantage. So to give you an example, we had only
focused on one avenue.
We
become
focused
specialized.
on one neighborhood,
Yeah.
and we'd go in and pitch business, and we'd pitch against brokers that had 10 years, 20 years of experience, and we maybe only had sold 3 buildings. So we'd meet with the owner, and we say, yes, we've only sold 3 buildings, but one was down the block, one was across the street, and one was right next door to you. We know more about this neighborhood than anybody. We can advocate for you to convince buyers why they should pay more for your building. Hire us exclusively. And we had a very simple business plan. We said, we only sell buildings, we only represent sellers, we only work on exclusives, and we only work in your neighborhood. And that really resonated with people. And then when we started to grow, we put a broker to the north of us and a broker to the south of us. We grew it like a jigsaw puzzle, and then filled up Manhattan, and then went out to Queens and Brooklyn and the Bronx. And before you know it, we were covering the whole city.
But when was your deal where you and Paul said, okay, this is it? Like, this is the, one deal that's maybe not essentially, I'm not saying the biggest deal, like the most, highest in paid commission, but I'm just saying, which one was the deal that you remember when you said, we're getting now somewhere?
Well,
or maybe
I think
the year.
Rich, the most memorable deal for us was in 1993.
1993.
And I'll tell you that we were coming through the savings and loan crisis. Very famously, we ran the business on credit cards for a couple of years. We then had the credit card lines all maxed out, had to go get a loan from Paul's stepfather-in-law. And we basically...
So you invested in yourself, basically.
Yeah, we were on the brink of being out of business. And I remember we were hired by Rosenthal and Rosenthal to sell 3 buildings on East 50th Street. Between 2nd and 3rd Avenue, 3 apartment buildings. And the deal wasn't supposed to close for another 3 months. And I got a call from Steven Rosenthal, and he said, hey, Bob, where are you? I said, I'm sitting at my desk. He says, well, get over here. The deal closed, and I have your check.
Oh, wow.
So I get up from my desk. We're at 226 East 54th Street at this time, and I'm running down 54th Street. And Paul was on the corner.
By the way, the closing wasn't scheduled?
No, the buyers, the Oheb family closed early. So I'm running down 54th Street West. Paul is at the southeast corner of 54th and 3rd. I said, Paul, you'll never believe it. 50th Street closed. I'm going over to get the check. And literally, we were jumping up and down, hugging each other on the corner. So happy that that was a big deal back then. Our burn rate was $15,000 a month, and this was a $90,000 commission. So
wow.
That was 6 months of overhead for us.
Wow.
So that
great oxygen.
From then and in '93 we started to do a lot more of the REO sales for banks. The RTC was very busy. And so 93, 94 did a lot of bank work, and then that one deal kind of pulled us out of everything.
So that was like that's what I'm saying, the deal that maybe started to create, Massey Knackle. Now you guys were becoming and growing finally to where you wanted to go, right? That was the deal that you remember the best, right?
Yeah, that was the one that without that deal, we may not have made it out of the S&L crisis.
Unbelievable. That's a typical, I would say, New York story that inspires people. You know, Bob, I'm telling you very honestly, it inspires people to, like, you know, say, look at that. I love to look at the history and look at the past of pictures and those deals. It's just like creates an inspiration. You follow?
Yeah, well, that's Rich. That's what I try to do. If you follow me on social media,
of course I do.
I do every.
I follow you too much.
Every Thursday, I do a throwback Thursday where I talk about these things, about deals from the past or events from the past or things that are meant to not only.
Please remember that every Thursday. Now that Bob brought it up, if you follow me on LinkedIn, if you don't follow me yet, and you're in real estate, then I don't know how you can learn in real estate. But if you don't follow Bob Knakal, Robert Knakal on LinkedIn, he throws every Thursday, and he has you have a lot of inspirational, by the way, not only on Thursday, but you put a lot of inspirational,
motivational Monday,
motivational, yes.
We do testimonial Tuesday, Wednesday is kind of a mixed bag of stuff, but then Thursdays we do the throwback Thursday where we go back in time and talk about stuff from the old days. And then Friday, we generally do what we call the Knackle Nuggets, which is a piece of advice or a lesson learned over I'm in year 40 doing this, Rich. I'm embarrassed to say. But, you know, a nugget of some lesson learned or something that we think folks could learn from.
Amazing.
So,
amazing.
It's been really interesting.
No, it's very interesting, and it's very, like I said, inspiring to see all your history. I love the pictures you put on, and actually the one of the Rolodex that you show how old school was with your Rolodex of contacts, like, that's just, you know, I would call it vintage. I love it. Like, you know, it's only if people could, you know, appreciate the history of how you can make it in real estate and focus like you did, and Paul, you know, that's just amazing. And my next question to you is, like, which was actually the biggest deal? You have to tell me which was.
The biggest deal, we did a deal for the Watchtower in Brooklyn, and we did several deals for them. Worked with their real estate director, Dan Rice, who was a great guy. The two biggest properties.
In what year was that one? You refresh my memory.
I don't remember the year, but it
was a pretty long deal.
It was two. Well, we did deals for them over the course of about 15 years.
Yeah.
Started with some smaller properties, and they had been buying properties in Brooklyn for over 100 years. Had a couple of hundred properties. I mean, a massive portfolio. But the two biggest deals we did, two properties, which combined was the biggest deal for me, which about just under $700 million, was their headquarters building at 2530 Columbia, and then they had a full square block that was a parking lot that was 85J.
That was now a condo right now, a new development condo.
Correct.
Actually, it's selling very well, I think.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, the big deals never really, doing a bigger deal or a smaller deal, they're all the same. It's just the extra zeros. But sometimes the smaller deals are as challenging, as tricky. I mean, I won the Robert Lawrence Award in the Most Ingenious Deal of the Year contest for a $7.5 million deal at 41 West 47th Street. So it's not the size of the deal. I think what makes it really interesting for me is who's the seller, who's the buyer. There's so many characters. We talked about Sam Zell as a character. There are so many characters in real estate. And that's what makes it so much fun. It's a
story inside of it, right? It's all the story that brings the deal together, and then you look back at it and you're like, wow, you enjoy it. Like, you look at it with, like, good memories, right?
Right, and then you get to know who will tell you everything up front, and you have to drag things out.
You have to milk out stuff out of them, right?
So it's that's the most fun part, I think, about this business, is that every day is different. And I tell people that are getting into the business, you'll learn 80% of the business in your first year, and you'll spend the rest of your life learning the other 20%.
Wow.
I still learn stuff every day.
So 80%, according to Bob Knakal, is on your first year of real estate. That's 80% of your knowledge?
I think so, because, look, our business is not complicated. It's a very simple business. It's just a hard business. But it's simple to to implement. It's a lot of, if you use a football analogy, it's a lot of blocking and tackling. These are not fancy plays with flea flickers and all kinds of things. This is blocking and tackling and doing a lot of very fundamental things day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. And you have to do that if you really want to succeed.
I feel personally that real estate is like being on a treadmill, to be honest. And like you have to keep going on it, right? And no matter how much you work out, if you press stop, your competition is still going on the treadmill, and you destroy all the, not destroy, but you block all the hard work you did. So it's a continuous going on the treadmill for me.
And I think also part of it is that you have to prioritize and figure out what your most valuable revenue generating activities are. And because in our business, the more you work, the more work you make for yourself. You know, for instance, I'll work a whole weekend sometimes, and I feel great because my email box is empty, my reports are all done, my paperwork is finished, and my to-do list is, I got 80% of it done, and I feel awesome. And then by noon on Monday, I have an avalanche of stuff piled on top of me because everybody was reacting to all the stuff I did all weekend. So it's one of those things, I guess an economist would refer to it as a positive feedback loop. So actually, the more you do, the more you create for yourself to do.
Like a snowball effect.
Right. So you never get everything done.
Never.
You have to prioritize, and you have to get the most important.
It's like a treadmill. You can't stop. You have to keep going, and the more speed you go, the more you sweat, the more you put into it. But the result always great, you know. And I feel that on you, and I think like you are an example of like hard worker, working smart. I feel nowadays today people think that, you know, I don't need to work hard. I can work smart. And some people say no, you have to work hard. But I feel that there has to be a blend combination. You can't just be working hard, sitting on the chair. You have to also actually work smart about it, right? So people feel like it's like a blanket, right? I'll cover one side, I'll cover the other side.
Well, they say we can control our effort and our attitude. And when it comes to effort, it's not a question of the amount of effort, it's where that effort is directed. And if the effort is directed at the right things, then you can be very efficient and effective with how you operate. Correct. But you could work around the clock and not get anywhere. You have to be working on the right thing.
Very correct. And I think that you and Paul were the pioneer of the zip codes tackling, right? You were putting agent concentrated in zip codes, right? Like focus in financial district, focus in like Kips Bay, West Chelsea. You started to implement this rule of like your agent becoming experts in a certain territory.
Yeah, well,
and you deal with those agents only,
that
right?
Stemmed out of a few things. One was the realization that we're not in the real estate business. We're in the information business. And the real estate was just the thing that the information's based on. The other reason why a geographic focus was important back in the 80s and 90s was that the amount and accuracy of publicly available information was horrible. So you had to really dig into a neighborhood to know.
There's a lot of work back end of like studying, getting data, like the
preparation.
Hard preparation.
Yeah, a lot of preparation. Today, I would say that approach would not work as well, simply because there is so much data
available.
You go online, you find out somebody's home address, their cell phone number, their shoe size, whatever
everything. When they change the toilet, when they put a new wallpaper.
Yeah, so today I think product specialization is more important than geographic specialization. And that's because as a broker, you have two main assets. You have your knowledge and your time. And you're going to spend your whole career gaining more knowledge. You can't make more time, so you have to use time more effectively. So let's say I'm a generalist, and last week I sell an office building, a retail property, and an apartment building, and this week I'm pitching an apartment building. That owner doesn't care about the office building and the retail property that I sold last week. They want to hear everything about the apartment building. If I had sold 3 apartment buildings last week, that owner wants to hear everything about those 3 sales. So every minute I worked last week is accretive towards helping me get this week's assignment, whereas in the first example, only a third of my time spent is helping me get the next deal. So it's a way to leverage your time and use your time more effectively by being a product specialist.
I can tell you're a very calculative, methodical person. I can tell that. And that's also resonating in your great success. So then basically you and Paul keep going, with tractions, deals, growing the company, putting more offices around the city, and growing the company to a very big magnitude, recognizing that logo of Massey Knackle, right? So then let's get to the main game changer, when it was like Cushman coming to you and saying, "Hey, we want to buy you guys." So can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, I'll also say, if you look back and say, okay, we sold the business in 2014, you guys were geniuses. It was the perfect time. There were 5,534 buildings sold in 2014, an all-time record that still stands by more than 10%. It was the perfect time, but we weren't smart enough to determine that. We actually decided we would try to sell in 2014 in 2007. In 2007, we were approached by one of the big firms. They made a very, very big offer to us.
Right before the crash in 2008.
Right. And for a variety of reasons, that deal didn't happen. But what we did learn through going through that process was that when we were going to sell the business, we would be on 5-year contracts. So we looked ahead and we said, well, in 2015, February of 15, Paul's turning 55. A buyer is going to think that these contracts are more valuable if we're in our 50s than if we're in our 80s. So in 2014, if the market is not totally in the tank, we should think about selling at that time. So, of course, we don't sell. Then 2008, 2009, GFC hits. Things are horrible. If we had to sell the business in 2009, we'd have been lucky to get $2 million for it. We had to fire 25% of our staff. 2010,
which for 2008, it wasn't that bad. I mean, the world was collapsing. No one was even talking about real estate. It was like a real estate tsunami, if I can call it. And buildings were like selling for, like, I wouldn't say cent on the dollar, but there were like people ready to give the buildings for taxes, exchange of paying for the taxes.
Well, it was a tough time, no doubt about it.
Yeah,
so we unfortunately had to make a lot of cuts. But then the market started coming back in 2011.
Huge
we went
turnaround.
back, hired everybody back. We were rolling, had our best year ever in 2014. So the market wasn't in the tank. So we went out, hired an investment bank, put the company on the market, and it just was a perfect scenario for Cushman. Unbeknownst to us, Ed Forst at Cushman was prettying the company up for a sale of the entire business. They had a weak capital markets presence in New York City, so they needed us to
prior
make it look
to
better.
buying Massey Knackle, they weren't the real name in New York City. They weren't like, the CBRE or JLL.
No, they had a capability, but
it wasn't that powerful, if I can call it that way.
Right.
Until then, I guess people were all speculating or saying that was the main reason, except from your Rolodex and
they had
transaction history.
Yeah, they had my good friend Darcy Stakem started her career there. She moved on to CB. And then Cushman never regained the steam that they had when Darcy was there. And so it was a good fit for them to buy us, and it was a great exit for us.
Amazing. So now I want to discuss a little bit of the, I think the most important thing right now we're talking about is the interest rate hike. So it's getting a little bit everyone worried. I think, transaction in percentage dropped dramatically. Everybody is trying to understand, where are we going with the interest rates? What's going to happen? There's a lot of question asked, a lot of worry. The rate's going to go higher. They're going to stop. But at the end of the day, it's the main question is, some states are performing better than some other states, but the interest rates are all the same. It's not that they're self-governed by other issues. They don't have a 4% versus a 7% interest rate, right? New York State. So what is your forecast about what's going to happen to New York City? I mean, right now we are facing, we improved after COVID, New York City, but I feel that still security is lacking, infrastructure is lacking, welcoming new business, new ventures is lacking. It's not a very pro-business city right now, although New York City is the capital, if I can say it, of the world. Everybody sees New York City as the main beacon of light for any kind of investor, from Asia to Middle East to Europe to South America. Maybe not so much South America, but all those countries see New York City. But we're not right now what we used to, and people are like not mocking us in some way, but they're saying, look what happened to New York City. Like, it seems that they were waiting for us to go down a little bit to say, oh, you guys were bullies, but now look how you, in what state you are. So what is your forecast? What is your thoughts? What are we looking at?
Well, you brought up about 6 different topics in that
Correct.
question.
Let's start from the interest rates. Let's start from the interest.
Well, interest rates. I think we have to understand that the Fed is just a bunch of human beings, and I think they misdiagnosed what the problem with the economy was.
Your sentiment is shared by a lot of people.
And so they, it's like going to the doctor and you have disease A, and the doctor thinks you have disease B, and then they aggressively treat you for disease B. That's what happened. I think that the increases were too sharp, too quick, and when the Fed makes a move, generally it takes several months to feel the effects of the move. But instead, we were like dominoes, one increase after the next, after the next, after the next. So I think that that was a mistake. And certainly it's had a negative effect on real estate.
But they seem not to stopping because they keep they're rising the interest rate every other quarter, or they keep bringing it up. So they seem not to understand it. No matter, it can be that they're all like asleep at the wheel. Like someone has to see something. Like no one sees, no one stops. They're keeping the rates are keep going on. Nothing is getting better.
Well, see, I also think that the increase in rates is being overemphasized today because we were in such a low interest rate environment for so long. If you look, the average 10-year Treasury over the last 50 years has been 5.4%. So, today it's just under 4%. Historically, that's not so bad. So I think that what will happen is that borrowing will become less expensive when lenders start to feel more comfortable about the direction the market's going in. Spreads will compress, and that will have a beneficial effect on the market. If you think about it, the Fed actually started raising rates in March of last year. It didn't really start to impact the real estate market until August, September. That's when spreads started to widen and made borrowing much more expensive. We saw that in the land market. Just land in Manhattan for condos is down 20 to 30% since last September, mainly because construction loan pricing has gotten so high.
And it's very tough to get construction loans, and no matter what. Right now in New York City, not all banks are prone to give construction loans. It's a very difficult financing situation for the landlords that want to develop nowadays. It's not easy. And now we have I think a bigger issue is the office markets. I mean, office leasing, although it picked up a little bit, I think the Midtown segments is suffering a lot. There's a lot of empty buildings. There's a lot of new development coming up of office building, Class A building, office building, modern, we all all the amenities. And there's a lot of other office building that people are running to renovate to compete with them. But there's a lot of vacancy. What is also your forecast on that issue?
Yeah, well, I think generally, I think that the market, I see a recovery sometime next year, hopefully the beginning of next year. But I think the retail sector is already starting to recover, but it's been hit so hard for so many years. I think retail rents have stopped going down, leasing activities picking up, and we're getting investor calls for the first time in about 5 years for investors looking to buy retail.
But you're saying that the office building in 2024, like quarter one, quarter two?
No. Let me finish. The retail, I think, is recovering. Multifamily, notwithstanding the fact there are significant political headwinds, there's a lot of demand for multifamily, and that's hanging in there fairly well. I think land, you have to look at each product type separately. There's no land being sold for rental housing because there's no tax abatement today.
No incentive.
As I said, residential condo land is down significantly because of construction loan pricing. And the office market is the one sector that I don't see recovering next year. But when you talk about office, you have to disaggregate it into the new construction Class A buildings, which are doing fairly well, and everything else. And no matter how much money you put into the older building, You can't do everything. You can't change ceiling heights. You can't take columns out. So it's very difficult for an older building to compete with today's new construction buildings. I mean, for instance, stand on the east side of Park Avenue and look at J.P. Morgan's new headquarters building and count up 10 floors and then go over to the building to the north, and you're on like the 22nd floor. It's such a different product. Today's modern office building, and I've been in Related's buildings over in Hudson Yards. You feel like you're in a different world. You don't feel like you're in an office building. It is a completely different experience. So
one Vanderbilt.
One Vanderbilt, and all the new stuff is really great. It seems like demand is good for that.
So what's going to happen to Class B office?
That's the question. I think some of it will be converted. I think values are getting low enough that between the cost of buying the building and the cost of demolishing the building, you're getting to the point where you're going to be below land value. So I think a lot of those buildings will be demolished. And if the market keeps heading the way it's heading, if you tell me 5 years from now that there were more buildings that were demolished than converted during this period, I wouldn't be surprised.
So you think there's going to be more like building that instead of getting a lift or change of the facade and just maybe the hallways renovated, you're going to see actually people knocking it down and building new office buildings?
I think that's a likely scenario, yeah.
That's going to be a very interesting scenario to see going on because, I know a lot of buildings right now still have problem to get filled in or to call back the employees. I think and also don't forget that the way I see it, as you brought up JP Morgan Chase, once it's finished, it's about 1.8 million square feet, that building, right? If give or take, right?
I think it's a little more, but
yeah,
it's a big building.
Big building, about maybe close to 2 million square feet. It's going to recall also all the temporary office spaces they're leasing JP Morgan around, right? So it's going to create a little bit of vacuum in Midtown, the Midtown block from like Fifth Avenue to Park Avenue. I would say maybe from the 40th Street to 50th Street. It's going to create more availability. So that will impact more these office buildings. As it is right now, they're standing right now. There's buildings empty.
The reality is we went into the pandemic with about 25 million feet vacant. There's about 27 million feet under construction or planned now. And
25 million square feet.
27 million.
27 million.
Either under construction or planned. If aggregate demand for office, because of work from home and changing environment, whatever, goes down by just 10%, that's another 40 or 50 million feet. So we could have 100 million feet empty. The policymakers need to do something to incentivize the conversion of the space to alternative uses. It would be, and housing is the number one thing it should be. We desperately need housing, and it would be great for the office market to get rid of some of this overhang of vacant space. So I think with the right policy, we really could achieve some great results, but we need that. Like 421G works so beautifully downtown to incentivize the conversion of office buildings to resi. We had 1,800 dwelling units in the financial district at 9/11. There are almost 30,000 down there today, mostly precipitated by the 421G program. I told the governor we should have the 421G program should be citywide. Incentivize the conversion of this older, obsolete space.
Correct. And there was any, let's say, resistance to that, or there was any?
Well, let's just say everything's on the table, I guess.
Well, yeah, of course, that was a great incentive actually. That created a lot of like new buildings, not new buildings, but created a lot of incentive for developers to come and grab them. Also this tax incentive. Even 421A, it was amazing. Like, it helped a lot spur the economy, especially after the, I'll call it the Lehman collapse, 2008, the financial crisis. That helped a lot to bring back businesses and investors, people back in those areas affected. So I don't know why, the policymakers or anyone does not get incentivized to reinstate it or bring it up.
Look, there are a number of things. The reality is, to fix the housing problems in New York, all we have to do is look at the supply side of the equation. And if you don't believe economics works, just look at the pandemic. We had people leaving the city, vacancy rose, rents in Manhattan dropped by about 30%. So you want the city to be more affordable for everybody? Simply do things that will allow for supply to be built. do things like raise the 12 FAR cap on residential density, put a 2x density if you will build a building, and give a deed restriction that says you're not going to convert the building, it'll stay a rental for 99 years. Bring back the IAI and the MCI programs, which incentivize the private sector to dump tens of billions of dollars into the housing stock. And that would also free up tens of thousands of units that are nailed shut because it doesn't make sense to rent them today. Bring back the 421A/Affordable New York program to get things going. The list goes on and on of things that could be done to increase supply, but every single piece of legislation that has been enacted since 2018 or ignored since 2018 has done nothing but exerted upward pressure on residential rents. So if you're a free market tenant in New York City and you feel like you're paying too much rent, turn around, look at your local politician. It's their fault.
Thank you for that, Bob, by the way. Well, now, again, obviously New York City is connected to politics, right? So there's another very important topic, and a very hard one, is like all the migrants, immigration, homeless people that come there, and there's no solution to it. They're putting them in the hotels without any policy, seems like. They're just saying, okay, take shelter, no problem. So some hotels just became a homeless shelter, which I think the city should provide for them 100%, but I don't think that's a solution. What's your take on that?
Well, I think it has tangentially helped the hotel market because it has taken thousands of rooms out of the supply. We've had, the hotel market was very, very negatively impacted by
like COVID. Pandemic. Yes, of course.
And so we had several rooms have been taken out of the stock because they've been converted to other uses. We sold a couple of hotels that are being converted to student housing. And then you have another big stock of rooms being used for the migrants. So that took stock out of the supply. So consequently, that's been helping the hotel market come back a little bit. So occupancies are good. Rates are going up, so that actually has had a side effect of being positive for the hotel market.
Yeah, but what we saw the scene in the Row Hotel, I mean, they're not very reassuring to the same, homeless people. It's not very reassuring to them. They need more, security. There must be more a system than just bringing them and putting them in any hotel. I mean, it's not a question of, like, I think, financials or hotel building or revenue. I'm talking from a standpoint of view of, like, security, really solving the problem, because it seems to me that they're becoming like a big salad. Just put anyone there, put it there. It's becoming also, people don't feel comfortable going with families and kids. I mean, I don't see any more family and kids walking on the streets, going on Fifth Avenue. They don't feel secure in the city right now. And I don't think by doing this kind of action, you'll make it more secure. Still, again, I say that they need help. The city should subsidize finding them shelters, accommodation, of course. But I don't think just picking on a hotel or any location, just tell them, go and take the space, is the answer.
Yeah, Rich, these are very complicated issues. And I think, part of it has to do, and I think the mayor has recognized that part of it is that his hands are tied by the laws, but we have to have a system where people are productive and get along within the society in which they live. If you're breaking the rules, then should you be allowed to continue to keep breaking the laws within the environment and have no ramifications? But these are very, very complicated issues. There are push and pulls on each side of it, and that's above my pay grade. So I'll just look at it from, I don't look at the world as a Democrat or a Republican. I look at the world as a real estate-tarian. So I just try to figure out how things are going to impact the real estate world.
You keep your objective as real estate. Like, you keep out of that politics discussion.
Right.
Very good. Anyway, I wanted to say it was a pleasure, Bob, to have you here in conclusion. Thank you for, giving us all the history of Bob Knackle, Massey Knakal, until the way to Cushman. I think that you are a continuous leader of real estate in New York City. I think there are not many figures like you. And it's an honor for us to have you on the show. Thank you so much.
Well, Rich, I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you, Bob.
Good.